My son abandoned me on a desolate highway in the middle of nowhere, declaring that he couldn't afford another mouth to feed in his household. I, an elderly father who had raised him with love and devotion for decades, stood beneath the scorching desert sun, but not as a victim. When he returned home, he discovered my carefully placed note. After reading it, he called me frantically 63 times to be exact. But true justice was only beginning, and the consequences he faced were far beyond anything he could have imagined. Before we continue with this profound tale of family, respect, and the courage to stand up for one's dignity, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Now, let's return to this story that explores the complex dynamics between generations and the price of taking love for granted. 47 years. 47 years I had devoted to raising this man, and this was the gratitude I received in return. My weathered hands trembled slightly as I gazed upon the inheritance documents spread across my mahogany desk, the same desk where I had helped him with homework decades ago, where I had taught him to write his name, where we had planned his future together. The fountain pen felt unusually heavy between my fingers, resistant to moving toward the signature line that would seal his financial future. Behind me, Margaret's antique music box continued its gentle melody, playing the waltz we had danced to at our wedding 42 years ago. Even 3 years after her funeral, I found myself unable to silence that bittersweet song. It was 9:47 in the evening on July 3rd, 2024, and the house felt unnaturally quiet despite the fact that Daniel and his family were sleeping comfortably in the guest rooms, upstairs rooms that had become their permanent residence far longer than anyone had originally intended. I lifted Margaret's silver-framed photograph from the corner of my desk, studying her gentle smile that had been captured during our 40th anniversary celebration. She had worn that elegant blue dress I had surprised her with, the one that perfectly matched her eyes and made her feel beautiful even as age had begun to mark us both. Her voice seemed to whisper across the years, as clear and wise as if she were sitting in her favorite chair beside me. "Don't allow our son to take advantage of your generous heart, Harold. People reveal their true character when they believe no one is paying attention." The familiar scent of old wood polish mingled with the faint trace of her lavender perfume that somehow still lingered in this room, clinging to her personal belongings that I couldn't bear to pack away. I touched the cool metal of her wedding ring, which I now wore on a chain around my neck, having moved it there when my arthritis made wearing it on my finger too painful. The weight of it against my chest served as a constant reminder of the promises we had made to each other and to our family. Daniel had completely forgotten my 71st birthday last month. When I had gently mentioned it during our evening meal, he had laughed dismissively, claiming that work pressures had overwhelmed his memory. Yet I had clearly seen his personal calendar spread across the kitchen counter that very morning, meticulously noting his golf tournament scheduled for that same day. Apparently, some commitments were more memorable than others, and honoring his father's birthday ranked considerably lower than his recreational pursuits. 3 weeks ago, when those concerning chest pains had sent me to seek medical attention, his response had been equally telling. "It's probably just indigestion, Dad. You tend to worry unnecessarily about every little ache." There had been no offer to accompany me to the doctor's appointment. No genuine concern reflected in his voice, only the unmistakable irritation of someone being inconvenienced by another person's health concerns. I closed my eyes and heard Margaret's prophetic words again, spoken from her hospital bed during those final difficult weeks. "Watch carefully how he behaves when he believes he stands to gain something, Harold. That will show you exactly who he has become." The legal documents rustled softly as I set them aside and signed. My chest felt constricted, each breath requiring more effort than usual, not from any physical ailment, but from the emotional weight of dawning realization. Through the window, I could see Daniel's expensive BMW gleaming in the driveway, a vehicle he had somehow managed to afford while regularly requesting that I cover household groceries and utility bills. Perhaps it was time to discover Daniel's authentic nature, to move beyond assumptions and hope to concrete understanding. I stood slowly, my joints protesting after hours of contemplation at this desk. The inheritance papers returned to their drawer, remaining unsigned for now. The house keys felt substantial in my hand as I walked to the window, observing the shadows dancing across the garden that Margaret had cultivated with such care and pride. A test that's what Margaret would have suggested, a carefully considered way to determine with certainty what kind of man our son had truly become. Tomorrow morning would bring clarity one way or another. The bacon sizzled rhythmically in Margaret's well-seasoned cast iron skillet as morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the familiar breakfast routine. It was 7:15 on July 5th, and I had been awake since 5 o'clock, mentally rehearsing the words that would either confirm my fears or prove them unfounded. Our round breakfast table maintained its established seating arrangement of the past 4 years. Daniel at the head position, Sandra to his right, the children across from each other, and my designated spot at the far end where I could observe everyone's reactions and expressions. Daniel was already absorbed in his smartphone, checking work emails while mechanically sipping his coffee. The children were engaged in their typical morning squabble over the last piece of toast, while Sandra spread butter with the automatic precision of someone performing a well-rehearsed routine. Everything appeared perfectly normal, a typical family morning filled with ordinary interactions and familiar rhythms. I cleared my throat deliberately and set down my coffee mug with enough emphasis to draw attention. I received an unexpected call yesterday evening from the manufacturing plant. Daniel glanced up from his phone, eyebrows raised in mild curiosity. Sandra's hand paused mid-butterstroke. 10-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Michael continued eating, blissfully unaware of any shift in the morning's atmosphere. They're implementing significant budget reductions, I continued, measuring my words carefully. After 28 years of dedicated service, they're eliminating my position effective immediately. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted them while studying Daniel's face as it transformed from surprise through rapid calculation to something considerably colder and more distant. "What does that mean for you, Grandpa?" Emma asked, her young voice cutting through the tension with innocent directness. "It means my income will be substantially reduced, sweetheart. My pension benefits will barely cover basic necessities, let alone contribute to household expenses as I have been doing." Michael continued methodically eating his cereal, completely disinterested in adult financial complications. But Daniel physically recoiled, pushing his chair back slightly to create distance between us. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, a reflexive response that spoke volumes about his immediate priorities. "Dad, I need to be completely honest with you," Daniel said, his voice carrying that same tone of irritation I had heard when he discussed my health concerns. "I simply cannot afford to support additional family members right now. I have my own responsibilities, my own family obligations to consider first." My hands tightened around my coffee mug, the ceramic surface growing almost uncomfortably warm against my palms, but I maintained my grip and my composure. This was exactly the response Margaret had predicted, delivered with the cold calculation of someone prioritizing financial convenience over family loyalty. Sandra nodded quickly in agreement, supporting her husband as she invariably did. "Daniel is absolutely right, Harold. We're already stretched to our financial limits. The children have school fees, sports equipment, clothing costs. We're barely managing our current obligations. Is Grandpa going to be okay?" Emma's voice wavered with genuine concern, the only person at the table who seemed to consider the human impact of the situation. "He'll figure out some solution," Daniel replied dismissively, his attention already returning to his phone screen. "There are government programs for senior citizens, assistance options available for people in his situation." Programs, assistance options, as if I were some stranger seeking charity rather than the man who had sacrificed for decades to provide him with opportunities, who had funded his education, who had opened my home when he claimed to need temporary shelter. The clinical detachment in his voice struck me more painfully than Margaret's death had, at least with her passing. I had understood what was happening and why. Well, I said slowly, rising from the table with deliberate dignity, I suppose I need to consider my options carefully. You'll manage, Dad, Daniel responded without looking up from his email. You always have before. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 71 years in my bones and joints. The kitchen suddenly seemed foreign despite having shared breakfast at this same table for the better part of 4 decades. Even the familiar morning light appeared different, harsher somehow, revealing details I had previously chosen not to see. I think I'll rest for a while and consider my situation, I announced quietly. I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, shoulders sagging under the emotional weight of what had just transpired. It was barely 8 o'clock in the morning, and already the day felt unbearably long. My heart pounded against my ribs, not from physical exertion, but from the profound shock of witnessing my son's true character laid bare so starkly. The master bedroom remained exactly as it had since Margaret's passing. Her side of the bed stayed untouched, pillow arranged the way she had preferred it, her vanity still holding the same perfume bottles and silver hairbrush with strands of gray hair still caught in the bristles. Her empty ring dish sat beside them. I wore her wedding band now, alongside my own, both on the chain around my neck. For years, I had been telling myself that their living arrangement was temporary, that Daniel's financial struggles were legitimate, that his promises to find independent housing were sincere. I walked to the dresser and picked up our wedding photograph, studying Margaret's radiant young face smiling back at me in white lace and innocence. Beside it sat Daniel's college graduation picture from 22 years ago, capturing a moment when he had been so proud, so grateful for the opportunities we had provided. Thank you for everything, Dad, he had said that day, wearing his cap and gown with such dignity. I promise I'll make you proud of the investment you've made in me. The irony of those words burned in my chest now. I sank onto the edge of the bed, holding Margaret's photograph with both hands while gazing through the window at Daniel's gleaming BMW, a luxury he had purchased 8 months after moving into our home temporarily. When had I stopped questioning the permanence of that arrangement? The original conversation played in my memory with painful clarity. 4 years ago, Daniel had stood in this very kitchen with Sandra beside him, both appearing desperate and genuinely grateful for assistance. Just until we can establish our financial footing, Dad, he had explained earnestly. 6 months at the most. We'll contribute whatever we can toward utilities and groceries, and we'll start looking for our own place immediately. And I, lonely and vulnerable in the aftermath of Margaret's first heart attack, had welcomed them with open arms. Take all the time you need, I had insisted. Margaret always wanted this house filled with family. But Margaret had recognized the truth long before I had been willing to see it. I remembered her sitting on this very bed 2.5 years ago, concern creasing her still beautiful forehead. They're becoming far too comfortable here, Harold. When did you last hear Daniel mention house hunting or saving for a down payment? I had defended him then, making excuses about the challenges of saving money in difficult economic times. He's working diligently, Margaret. Building financial stability takes patience and time. She had taken my hand in hers, her fingers still warm despite the illness that was slowly claiming her strength. People reveal their authentic selves when they believe no one is watching. Harold, remember that truth. I had dismissed her concerns as the worry of someone weakened by illness. But Margaret had been observing patterns I had been too generous to acknowledge. She had watched Daniel's financial contributions diminish from $200 monthly to $50, then to promises of catching up when the promotion comes through. She had noticed him purchasing the BMW while claiming inability to help with grocery expenses. She had observed Sandra's expensive shopping excursions occurring simultaneously with pleas of financial hardship. When exactly had I become the burden in my own home? The utility bills had nearly tripled with their occupancy. Grocery expenses had more than doubled. The constant wear on appliances, from the washing machine to the water heater, had necessitated repairs and replacements that I quietly handled without complaint. And through it all, I had continued making excuses for why they couldn't contribute more, why they couldn't locate suitable housing, why every financial responsibility somehow remained mine to shoulder. I pressed Margaret's photograph against my chest, wishing desperately that I could ask her forgiveness for being so willfully blind to the truth she had tried to help me see. From downstairs, I could hear the low murmur of urgent voices. Daniel and Sandra engaged in one of their kitchen conferences, the kind they assumed I couldn't overhear from upstairs. The muffled conversation from the kitchen cut through my grief and contemplation like a blade through silence. I carefully placed Margaret's photograph back on the dresser, my hands trembling with something beyond sorrow, now a growing awareness that perhaps my suspicions needed confirmation. It was 9:30 in the evening, and Daniel and Sandra were conducting one of their whispered conferences, the kind they believed were private and undetectable. My bedroom door protested with a familiar creak as I opened it slowly. Those hinges had needed oil for months, but tonight their complaints seemed thunderously loud in the quiet house. I paused, listening carefully. Their voices continued below, urgent yet controlled, suggesting a conversation they definitely didn't want the children to overhear. The hallway stretched before me, illuminated only by streetlight filtering through the window at the far end. Each step down the staircase required careful placement on boards I knew would remain silent versus those that would announce my presence. After 33 years in this house, I had memorized every sound it made. At the bottom of the staircase, I could see warm light spilling from the kitchen doorway. The dishwasher hummed through its cycle, providing perfect acoustical cover for whatever they were discussing. I pressed myself against the wall just outside the entrance and focused on their words. "This unemployment situation is actually perfect timing," Daniel was saying, his voice carrying that same calculating tone I had heard at breakfast. "We can finally address the situation permanently." My heart began hammering against my ribs. I fumbled for my smartphone, nearly dropping it in my haste to access the recording function. The screen illuminated, showing 67% battery life. My fingers, made clumsy by age and adrenaline, struggled with the touchscreen interface. And if something unfortunate happens to him during this vulnerable period, Sandra's voice was remarkably cold and matter-of-fact. Well, elderly people become confused and disoriented when they're under stress. They make poor decisions, wander into dangerous situations. These things happen more frequently than people realize. I managed to activate the voice recording feature just as Daniel responded with chilling agreement. "Exactly right. We would naturally be devastated. Search extensively. Contact all appropriate authorities. We play the role of the worried, loving family who did everything possible to locate their missing patriarch. He just disappeared one day. We looked everywhere, called everyone we could think of. The phone trembled in my grip as the full scope of their intention became clear. 4 years of hospitality, for years of opening my home and sharing my resources, and this was how they expressed gratitude by planning my elimination. Without him, the house transfers to us automatically through the inheritance provisions," Sandra continued with the same clinical detachment. "We can finally stop pretending to care about his endless stories, his medical concerns, his constant presence in our lives. For years of playing the grateful, loving family members. I'm completely exhausted by the charade," Daniel agreed with shocking coldness. "This unemployment crisis just pushed me past my tolerance point. I refuse to continue supporting deadweight, especially when he's becoming more demanding and needy with age." Cold perspiration broke across my forehead despite the summer warmth. My legs felt unsteady, but I maintained my position and kept the phone steady, recording every toxic word of their conspiracy. The beautiful aspect is that it resolves every problem simultaneously, Sandra said with disturbing satisfaction. No more grocery bills, utility costs, medical expenses, insurance complications, just our real family in a house we can finally sell for significant profit. We could clear all our debts completely, Daniel added. Start fresh somewhere else, maybe that development we looked at in Arizona. Finally live the lifestyle we deserve instead of being dragged down by his limitations. I had heard more than enough, far more than any father should ever have to hear from his child. My phone displayed a recording duration of 4 minutes and 23 seconds, sufficient evidence to destroy them both if necessary. Moving with the same careful silence I'd used to descend, I climbed back to my bedroom, gripping the handrail for support that was both physical and emotional. Back in the sanctuary of my room, I stared at the phone screen where the recording file sat like a loaded weapon waiting for deployment. They want to play dangerous games with an elderly man's life and well-being. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. People reveal their authentic selves when they believe no one is watching. Well, Margaret, it appears you were absolutely correct about that observation. Steam rose gently from my coffee cup as I stirred it with deliberate slowness, watching Daniel fidget with his smartphone across our breakfast table. It was 7:30 on the morning of July 6th, and I had spent the sleepless hours planning every detail of my response strategy. The kitchen felt transformed, now no longer like home, but like a stage where we would all perform carefully rehearsed roles in a drama, whose conclusion only I could foresee. Daniel kept glancing towards Sandra, seeking encouragement for whatever script they had prepared during their late-night planning session. She nodded and smiled at strategically appropriate moments, playing the supportive wife with practiced precision. The children consumed their breakfast cereal in blissful ignorance, unaware that their parents had spent the previous evening orchestrating what amounted to premeditated murder. "How did you sleep last night, Dad?" Daniel inquired, his voice painted with artificial concern. "You seemed quite troubled yesterday after our conversation about your employment situation." I took a measured sip of coffee, using the pause to arrange my facial expression into something appropriately defeated and vulnerable. "Very poorly, son. This entire situation has me deeply worried about my future." I could almost see the relief washing over their faces. Their victim appeared to be responding exactly as they had hoped. Sandra leaned forward with rehearsed sympathy, her voice dripping with false compassion. "These kind of challenges have a way of working themselves out, Harold. Family always discovers solutions during difficult times." Speaking of family support, Daniel said, his timing obviously rehearsed, "I've been reconsidering my response yesterday morning. I realized I was perhaps too harsh in my initial reaction." My smartphone sat beside my coffee cup, voice recording already activated discreetly. Let them continue digging their own graves with their words. "I genuinely appreciate that reflection, son," I replied carefully. These old bones were feeling quite discouraged by your response. Daniel exchanged another meaningful glance with Sandra before continuing his performance. "What if we planned a family vacation together? Something that could bring us closer, help heal any wounds that might have developed between us recently." Emma looked up from her cereal with sudden interest. "A vacation? Where'd we go?" "I was considering the Grand Canyon," Daniel said, warming to his role with growing confidence. "Do you remember when Mom and I took you there as a child, Dad? You always said it was one of your most treasured memories." The mention of Margaret in this context nearly shattered my composure entirely. They were using her precious memory to justify their plan to murder me, but I forced my voice to remain steady and even grateful. "That sounds absolutely wonderful, Daniel. When were you thinking we might take this trip?" "Next week would be ideal," he replied, gaining confidence as he believed his manipulation was succeeding. "I can arrange vacation time from the office. We could make it a genuine adventure for the entire family." Michael bounced excitedly in his chair. "Could we see real cowboys and Indians, Grandpa?" "We'll see many amazing and memorable things, Michael," I assured him, gently ruffling his hair. Inside, fury burned cold and steady, but my voice remained warm and loving for the children's sake. Sandra jumped in with her prepared enthusiasm. It would be beneficial for all of us, Harold. The children absolutely love traveling with their grandfather, and it would provide us time to really communicate, to work through any misunderstandings that might have developed. The drive itself could be quite beautiful, Daniel added with calculated casualness. We could take the scenic route through New Mexico, experience some of that famous desert landscape everyone talks about. There was the desert, those empty places where elderly men disappear without witnesses or explanations. How long would that drive take? I asked, playing my assigned part in their deadly theater. Approximately 8 or 9 hours, Daniel responded with studied nonchalance. But we'd take our time. Stop whenever you need to rest or stretch your legs. Stop whenever they needed to abandon me. More accurately, I allowed a smile to cross my face, the first genuine expression of satisfaction I had felt since this nightmare had begun. That sounds absolutely perfect, son. I believe Margaret would have loved the idea of our entire family taking this journey together. Sandra practically glowed with satisfaction at my apparent acceptance of their plan. Should we plan for next Thursday? That would give us adequate time to prepare properly. July 12th, I agreed readily. I'll certainly need to make some preparations of my own for our trip. Morning heat already shimmered off the asphalt as I observed Daniel loading the final suitcase into our SUV's cargo compartment. It was 6:45 on the morning of July 12th, and the organized chaos of family departure provided perfect cover for the deadly game we were all playing. Emma and Michael raced between house and vehicle, clutching forgotten tablets and beloved stuffed animals, their excitement genuine and heartbreaking given what their parents intended. The past week had been a masterpiece of careful preparation on multiple fronts. While Daniel researched desert routes and Sandra planned meal stops, I had been conducting my own research with considerably more serious intent. Through online forums, I had contacted Mike Henderson, a long-haul truck driver who would be at the Desert Vista truck stop outside Albuquerque precisely when I would need assistance. My survival supplies were carefully packed beneath layers of clothing in my travel bag: water purification tablets, energy bars, a compass, emergency cache, and a satellite emergency beacon I had purchased discreetly. Most importantly, my insurance policy waited in the kitchen, positioned exactly where they would discover it upon their return. Emma, Michael, do you have your tablets and chargers for the drive? Sandra called out, checking items off her mental preparation list. Got them, Mom. Emma waved her device enthusiastically while Michael struggled with his backpack zipper. Daniel wiped perspiration from his forehead despite the early morning hour. Dad, are you certain you have everything you need? It's going to be a very long drive, and we won't be making frequent stops once we reach the desert areas. The irony of his concern wasn't lost on me. He was worried about my comfort during the journey to my intended murder. I just need to retrieve my reading glasses from the kitchen, I said, patting my shirt pocket theatrically. Won't take more than a moment. I walked back into the house with casual determination, but my heart was racing with anticipation. The kitchen felt expectant, waiting. Behind the refrigerator, secured by Margaret's favorite sunflower magnet, I positioned the note I had written and revised dozens of times until every word served its purpose perfectly. I overheard your conversation on July 5th regarding your permanent solution to the Harold problem during this trip. Every word of your planning session is recorded on my phone and automatically backed up to cloud storage. If I do not return home safely within 48 hours, my attorney receives copies along with instructions to contact appropriate authorities immediately. I am fully aware of your financial motivations and your intended method. Choose your actions very carefully. Dad, perfect placement. They would discover it when they returned to pack my belongings, probably within hours of abandoning me in the desert. The timing would create maximum psychological impact and panic. Are we really going to see the Grand Canyon, Grandpa? Michael asked as I rejoined them at the vehicle. We're going to see some truly remarkable sights, Michael, I said, settling into the back seat behind the children. Things that will surprise everyone involved. The SUV's interior carried the scent of new leather and Sandra's vanilla air freshener. Daniel adjusted his mirrors and consulted the GPS system one final time. 8 hours and 42 minutes to their intended destination, according to the display. The fuel gauge showed completely full. They had planned every detail for their perfect crime. "Is everyone comfortable and ready?" Daniel asked, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "Ready for our adventure?" Sandra added, turning to smile at us with practiced warmth. I settled back in my seat, feeling the reassuring weight of my hidden emergency supplies. My smartphone showed full battery charge, and a backup power bank was safely tucked in my jacket pocket. Mike Henderson's contact information was memorized and written on waterproof paper, hidden in my wallet alongside the emergency cash I had distributed across multiple locations on my person. The SUV pulled away from the curb, and I took one final look at the house Margaret and I had called home for 43 years. In a few hours, Daniel and Sandra would execute their carefully planned scheme, but they had no idea that their intended victim had become the hunter. The highway stretched ahead into the distance, desert heat already creating those deceptive mirages that make water appear where none exists. Classic rock played softly from a radio as farmland gradually gave way to brown scrub brush and distant mesa formations. It was 12:45 in the afternoon, and we had been driving for 6 hours through Missouri, across Oklahoma, and now into the vast emptiness of New Mexico. The air conditioning worked steadily against the building heat outside, maintaining comfort that would soon become a precious memory. "Grandpa, tell us about when you built that treehouse for Dad," Michael requested, bouncing in his middle seat with tablet temporarily forgotten. I smiled, catching Daniel's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Your father was about your age, always wanting to climb higher than was safe or sensible. We spent 3 full weekends on that project, working together every step of the way." "Dad was good with tools?" Emma asked, genuinely surprised by this revelation about her father's childhood. "The finest little assistant I ever had," I said, remembering small hands eager to help and bright eyes absorbing every lesson about craftsmanship. He could hand me exactly the right tool before I even asked for it. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in the driver's seat. "That was a very long time ago, Dad. Different circumstances entirely." For hours, this had been our pattern, genuine family memories shared with innocent children, their laughter filling the vehicle, Daniel performing the role of devoted son with Academy Award-worthy conviction. Every 20 minutes, he would ask about my comfort level, offer to adjust the air conditioning, suggest stopping for rest breaks. If I hadn't overheard their murderous planning, I might have believed this concern was authentic. But then I would catch those quick, meaningful glances between Daniel and Sandra when they believed I wasn't observing. I noticed how Sandra obsessively checked the GPS, making notes on a small pad, the increasing tension in Daniel's shoulders as the landscape grew progressively more desolate and unforgiving. "Are we almost there yet?" Emma whined with typical child impatience. "This is taking forever and ever." "Just a few more hours, sweetheart," Sandra replied, her voice tight with false cheer. "Remember, this is Grandpa's special treat for all of us." Through my window, I watched mile markers flash past with increasing significance. The interstate had given way to smaller highways, and signs of civilization were spacing out dramatically. Gas stations appeared maybe every 40 miles now, and cell phone towers were becoming increasingly sparse. The children had grown quiet, worn down by heat and travel fatigue, despite the air conditioning. My smartphone showed no signal bars. We were entering the dead zone I had researched extensively, where cell towers were separated by vast distances and help was hours away from any point. "This country certainly is empty and isolated," I observed, keeping my voice conversational and innocent. "That's the beauty of it," Daniel replied with what I now recognized as sinister undertones. "Pure wilderness. untouched by modern civilization. A person could disappear out here completely and never be found. The words struck like ice water in my veins, confirming beyond any doubt that my worst fears were about to become reality. All my lingering hopes that I had misunderstood their conversation evaporated in that instant. Sandra shot him a sharp, warning look, but the damage was done. I caught his eyes in the mirror again, and this time I saw the cold calculation there, the assessment of a predator measuring his prey and finding the moment opportune. Mile marker 247 appeared ahead. Daniel began slowing the SUV gradually. I really need to use the restroom facilities, I announced, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I'm afraid I can't wait much longer. Of course, Dad, Daniel replied, pulling to the shoulder with practiced ease, as if he had planned this exact location. Take all the time you need. I climbed out into the blazing afternoon heat, feeling sweat immediately begin beating on my forehead. The temperature had to be approaching 105 degrees, and the sun felt like a physical weight pressing down from the cloudless sky. The children were already arguing about something inside the air-conditioned vehicle, their voices muffled through closed windows. Daniel stepped out as well, ostensibly to stretch his legs, but he remained positioned near the driver's door with the engine running ready for immediate departure. Thank you for arranging this trip, son, I said, looking directly into his eyes. It means everything to an old man to spend time with his family. Something flickered across his face, perhaps guilt, perhaps merely impatience to complete his task. Nothing personal, Dad, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. It's just business at this point. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed from the spinning tires. Emma and Michael pressed their faces against the back window, confusion rapidly transforming to tears as they watched their grandfather standing alone on the empty highway, growing smaller in the distance until heat mirages swallowed the SUV completely. The silence that followed was absolute. No traffic, no wind, no birds, nothing but the merciless afternoon sun and the sound of my own breathing. Well, Margaret, I said aloud to the empty desert, time to discover whether your old husband learned your lessons about preparation and self-reliance. Heat radiated from the asphalt in visible waves as I watched the empty highway where my family had vanished like a mirage. It was 1:20 in the afternoon, with the temperature climbing toward its daily peak somewhere around 110 degrees. Sweat had already darkened my shirt, but my breathing remained controlled and methodical. 45 years on factory floors had taught me valuable lessons about working in extreme conditions and managing physical stress. My first action was confirming what I already knew about communication. My smartphone showed 0 signal bars, exactly as my research had predicted. The screen displayed 89% battery life, more than adequate for my needs. This stretch of highway sat in a dead zone between widely spaced cell towers, making it perfect for a murder if you didn't realize your victim had spent a week preparing for precisely this scenario. Next came a visual assessment of my situation. Mesa formations rose in the distance like ancient monuments, offering some eventual shelter if I could reach them. Scrub brush dotted the immediate landscape, providing minimal shade but some protection from direct sun exposure. No buildings were visible in any direction, and traffic was extremely sparse, perhaps one vehicle every 30 minutes. It was indeed a perfect location for disposing of an unwanted family member, if that family member was helpless and unprepared. I unbuttoned my lightweight jacket and reached into the specially tailored inner pockets I had created during my week of preparation. 2 16-ounce water bottles emerged, still pleasantly cool from the vehicle's air conditioning. From my pants pockets came 4 high-energy protein bars and a small bag of trail, mix enough sustenance for an extended walk in challenging conditions. My hand-drawn map came from my wallet, its edges reinforced with tape for durability. Desert Vista truck stop, 6 miles east along this very highway. I had memorized the route completely, but seeing it on paper provided psychological comfort during a stressful situation. Mike Henderson's contact information was written on waterproof paper and tucked behind my driver's license, along with backup copies hidden in multiple locations. The emergency cash was distributed strategically, two $20 bills in my left shoe, several $100 bills folded into my belt, 50s tucked discreetly in my wallet. If I successfully reached civilization, I would have financial options available. 6 miles to Desert Vista, I announced to the empty landscape, my voice immediately swallowed by the vast silence. Mike promised he'd be there this week. Daniel thought he'd abandoned a helpless old man to die. Poor boy doesn't realize his father spent the week planning for exactly this possibility. Margaret's favorite saying had been hope for the best, prepare for the worst. She had taught me to think several moves ahead, whether repairing a broken machine or dealing with broken people. I adjusted my baseball cap to provide maximum sun protection and secure my sunglasses properly. The sturdy walking shoes I had selected specifically for this trip provided excellent traction on hot asphalt. My lightweight, long-sleeve shirt would help with temperature regulation while protecting my arms from sun exposure. The emergency cash distribution meant I couldn't lose all my resources to a single mishap. The temperature gauge in our SUV had read 98 degrees when they abandoned me. By mid-afternoon, desert temperatures typically peaked around 110 degrees. I would need to pace myself carefully, conserve both energy and water through small, frequent sips rather than large drinks, and rest in whatever shade I could find along the route. My factory safety training had covered heat exhaustion, recognition dizziness, nausea, excessive fatigue, confusion. But I also understood my own physical capabilities. Decades of 10-hour shifts on concrete floors had built leg strength that most men my age lacked, and my cardiovascular health remained excellent despite my age. My phone showed 1:28 p.m. I tucked the map into my shirt pocket, took one small, measured sip of water, and turned east toward my destination. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, shimmering with heat mirages that created false promises of water on the horizon. In the distance, I could hear the rumble of freight trucks on a parallel route. Civilization still existed, just beyond immediate reach. 6 miles in this heat would require approximately 2 hours if I maintained proper pacing. The key was establishing the right rhythm and holding it steady, just like any other challenging job that required endurance and determination. 35 minutes into my eastward journey, my feet had found their steady rhythm on the increasingly hot asphalt. Left, right, breathe, left, right, breathe. The desert sun hammered down relentlessly, but sweat evaporated quickly in the extremely dry air, providing some natural cooling. Mile 1 passed with memories flooding back. 8-year-old Daniel, dirt smudged and endlessly curious, standing beside me in our garage on weekend mornings. Dad, how exactly does the engine make the car move forward? Wide, eager eyes absorbing every explanation about pistons, combustion, mechanical advantage. Small hands reaching for tools, wanting to help, wanted to learn from the man he considered his hero and teacher. You're the smartest dad in the whole world, he had announced proudly after I successfully repaired his bicycle chain. Margaret had laughed from the kitchen doorway, flour dusting her apron from Sunday morning baking. Your father knows how to make broken things work again, she had told him with a smile that still warmed my heart across the decades. That's a genuine gift. My first water break came at mile 2. One small sip, cap twisted tight, bottle returned to pocket. The liquid was warm now, but still refreshing and life-sustaining. A truck rumbled past in the distance, its driver too focused on schedules and destinations to notice a solitary figure walking the highway shoulder. Teenage Daniel had been different embarrassed when school friends asked about my occupation. Do you have to tell everyone you work at the factory? He had muttered after a school awards ceremony where I had been introduced to his teachers and classmates. High school had brought new friends, college ambitions, and growing shame about his blue-collar roots. The eager questions about machinery and craftsmanship had stopped coming. The garage had become a place he actively avoided. Mile 3 brought blessed shade from a highway signed 30 seconds of relief from the relentless sun. My shirt clung to my back with perspiration, but my breathing remained steady and controlled. Heat exhaustion hadn't touched me yet, thanks to good conditioning from a lifetime of physical labor and my careful preparation. College had widened the emotional gap between us considerably. Visits home became filled with lectures about modern economics and thinking bigger than factory work. "Dad, you simply don't understand how the world operates now," he would explain with the arrogance of someone fresh from business classes, while my factory paychecks continued funding his education, his dreams, and his growing contempt for the man who made it all possible. Marriage to Sandra had sealed his transformation completely. Suddenly, my stories became interruptions, my presence an embarrassment at social gatherings. Family dinners shortened to obligatory appearances lasting barely an hour. "When are you going to start acting your age instead of trying to be everyone's buddy?" he had asked last Christmas, annoyed by my attempts to engage his children in conversation. Mile 4 tested my endurance, as heat mirages created phantom lakes ahead, desert illusions, promising relief, but delivering only more scorching emptiness. I adjusted my pace slightly, conserving energy for the remaining distance. The Desert Vista station wasn't visible yet, but my map indicated 2 miles remaining. Margaret's final months had revealed Daniel at his absolute worst. He had been impatient with her medication schedules, irritated by her weakness and increasing need for assistance, eager for inheritance conversations to begin while she still struggled for each breath. I had watched him calculate dollar amounts while his mother fought for her life. "He's not the boy you raised, Harold," she had whispered one evening when Daniel had left her hospital bedside early to attend a social event. "That boy died somewhere along the way. This person just wears his face and bears his name." Mile 5 brought the first glimpse of civilization, a faint structure shimmering in the distance like salvation itself. My smartphone showed 1 bar of signal strength returning as I approached the edge of the communication dead zone. They would be discovering my notes soon, if they hadn't already found it. When exactly had I become the embarrassment instead of the teacher? When had 45 years of honest, skilled work become something to hide from friends and colleagues? I had spent my entire career fixing broken machines, believing I could repair broken relationships with the same patience and determination. But some damage runs too deep for any repair. Some breaks are too fundamental to bridge. The Desert Vista station grew larger and more real with each step, solid and welcoming against the wavering heat. My phone chirped softly with returning signal strength 2 bars now, sufficient for calls and messages. I quickened my pace slightly, anticipation building for the confrontation that awaited. Margaret had always insisted I possessed the patience to outlast any problem, to find solutions where others saw only obstacles. Today would test that theory against desert heat, family betrayal, and the limits of human endurance. 2 bars of signal strength. They would be calling very soon. The moment I stepped through the glass doors of the Desert Vista station, my smartphone erupted in a digital symphony of panic. Buzz after buzz after buzz, the screen lighting up like a Christmas display with notification after notification. The blessed coolness of industrial strength air conditioning hit my sweat-soaked shirt as I stared at the chaos unfolding in my palm. 63 missed calls, all from Daniel. Each notification felt like a small but significant victory in a war I was finally winning. The call log told a story of escalating desperation and fear. The first call had come at 2:20 p.m., precisely when they would have discovered my absence from their intended abandonment site. Then every few minutes, with increasing frequency as panic set in and their perfect plan began unraveling. Text messages from Sandra were scattered between the calls like breadcrumbs of terror. "Call us immediately. Where are you? This is an emergency situation. Harold, please respond." 15 voicemails waited like little packages of fear and confusion. I turned the phone to silent mode and slipped it into my pocket. Let them experience anxiety. For a while longer, they had certainly earned it. You look like you've been walking in this heat for quite some time. Observe the clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read Maria. Is everything all right? Do you need any assistance? Vehicle trouble back on the highway. I replied, which wasn't entirely false. Is your motel still accepting check-ins at this hour? Of course, honey. Would you like me to call someone for help? Family members, perhaps, or roadside assistance? I almost laughed at the irony. No, thank you kindly. I have everything well under control. While Maria processed my motel registration with efficient professionalism, I allowed myself the pleasure of listening to the first voicemail. Daniel's voice was tight with forced calm and barely controlled panic. Dad, where are you? We stopped for fuel, and when we returned to the vehicle, you had simply vanished. We're searching the entire area. Please call us back immediately. Voicemail number 15 showed the first cracks in his facade. Please, Dad, just call us back. We're worried sick about your safety. Where could you possibly have gone in the middle of nowhere? By voicemail 32, his mask had completely disintegrated. I found your note behind the refrigerator. We need to talk urgently. This is all a complete misunderstanding. You don't understand what you thought you heard. The note, my insurance policy, written in careful block letters and positioned precisely where they would discover it when they returned home to pack my belongings and claim my inheritance. I overheard your conversation on July 5th regarding your permanent solution to the Herald problem during this trip. Every word of your planning session is recorded on my phone and automatically backed up to cloud storage. If I did not return home safely within 48 hours, my attorney receives copies along with instructions to contact appropriate authorities immediately. I am fully aware of your financial motivations and your intended method. Choose your actions very carefully. Dad, I had spent hours crafting those sentences, making them specific enough to create genuine fear while remaining vague enough to maintain my strategic advantage. Maria handed me the room key with a warm smile. Room 12, just down the walkway. Ice machine is at the end if you need it, and there's a family restaurant next door if you're hungry. I purchased cold water, electrolyte replacement drinks, and a clean shirt from the station's convenience section. My phone buzzed again with incoming call 64. I ignored it with growing satisfaction and confidence. The motel room was basic but immaculately clean, with a bed that looked like heaven after my desert marathon. I plugged my smartphone into the wall charger and watched it buzz again with call 65. Through the window, I could see the truck parking area where Mike Henderson would arrive tomorrow morning according to our arrangement. 63 calls in less than 3 hours. Margaret would have been proud of both my arithmetic and my strategic planning. Steam rose gently from my coffee cup as I watched the parking lot through the restaurant window. It was 7:35 on the morning of July 13th, and exactly on schedule, a blue Peterbilt semi-truck rumbled into the Desert Vista lot with the distinctive hiss of air brakes. I had slept more peacefully than I had in weeks. Remarkable how inner peace and justified satisfaction affect rest quality. Mike Henderson climbed down from his cab with the easy confidence of someone who had been driving highways professionally for 27 years. 58 years old, weathered face marked by sun and wind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He spotted me through the window and raised his hand in friendly greeting. Right on schedule, as promised, he said as he entered the restaurant. I hope you managed to get some decent rest after your ordeal yesterday. The best sleep I've had in weeks, I replied honestly, standing to shake his calloused but gentle hand. I cannot adequately express my gratitude for this assistance. Not everyone would help a complete stranger in such circumstances. Mike waved off my thanks with characteristic modesty. The road teaches you who deserves trust and who doesn't. You've got honest eyes, Harold, and your story rings true. Springfield is about 8 hours with my delivery schedule, perfect timing for both of us. Within 25 minutes, my minimal belongings were secured in the truck's comfortable sleeper compartment, and I was settled into the spacious passenger seat. Mike had prepared a thermos of excellent coffee and homemade sandwiches for our journey. The CB radio crackled occasionally with trucker communications, and classic country music played softly from the stereo system. Family is supposed to support each other, not exploit each other, Mike observed as we merged onto Interstate 40 heading east. He had asked no intrusive questions about my situation, but I had shared the basic outline: transportation trouble, family tensions, needing a ride home. That's what I always believe as well. I agreed, watching New Mexico desert gradually give way to Oklahoma plains. 47 years raising a son, and I thought I understood what kind of man he had become. Mike nodded with the understanding that comes from his own life experience. I've got 2 children myself, divorced 15 years now, but my ex-wife and I always put the kids first in every decision. I simply cannot imagine blood family turning against each other with malicious intent. The miles rolled by with comfortable conversation. Mike shared stories from the road, kindnesses from strangers, the genuine community among long-haul drivers, the deep satisfaction that comes from honest work performed with pride and skill. I found myself sharing carefully edited memories of Margaret, selected anecdotes about recent events, and reflections on how fundamental values seem to have shifted across generations. "Your wife sounds like she was a remarkably wise woman," Mike said after I quoted one of Margaret's favorite observations about people revealing their true character when they believe nobody is watching. "She could see through people like they were made of clear glass." "She certainly could," I agreed. I should have listened more carefully to her warnings and observations. The truck's comfortable rhythm, Mike's genuine decency, and our steady conversation created a healing space for reflection and recovery. Here was a complete stranger showing more consideration and respect than my own son had demonstrated in years. The contrast was both obvious and painful. We stopped twice at truck stops for fuel and mandatory rest breaks. Mike insisted on purchasing lunch, politely refusing my offers to pay. "You'll do the same for someone else when the opportunity arises," he said simply, and I knew he was absolutely correct. As afternoon turned to evening, familiar landmarks began appearing on the horizon. The water tower, visible from my neighborhood, came into view as we approached Springfield's outskirts. Home, where a significant reckoning awaited all parties involved. "That's my exit approaching," I said, pointing ahead through the windshield. "Home sweet home, as they say." Mike's truck disappeared around the corner as I walked up my familiar driveway with measured steps. It was 6:50 in the evening, and shadows stretched across the lawn I had maintained meticulously for decades. Every window in the house blazed with light. They were home, waiting and watching for any news about their missing family patriarch. My key turned smoothly in the lock I had installed 22 years ago. The front door swung open on well-oiled hinges. "Dad!" Daniel shot up from the living room couch, as if he had been electrocuted. "Thank goodness you're safe and sound. We've been searching for hours, calling hospitals, contacting police departments." Sandra appeared beside him instantly, her face a masterpiece of practiced relief and false concern. "We had absolutely no idea what happened to you. One moment you were there, the next you had completely vanished. We've been worried sick about your safety." Emma and Michael ran to me with genuine happiness and affection, wrapping their small arms around my waist in enthusiastic hugs. Their joy was real, and innocent children caught unknowingly in their parents' web of deception and manipulation. 63 phone calls suggest you weren't searching," I said calmly, returning the children's embraces while maintaining eye contact with Daniel. "You were panicking about the consequences of your actions." Daniel's face flickered with confusion before settling back into his carefully rehearsed performance. "We called repeatedly because we were desperate to locate you, Dad. You're clearly confused about the situation. We would never abandon you intentionally." The note I left on the refrigerator explains everything quite clearly. I interrupted quietly. Did you imagine I had forgotten how to read and comprehend simple English? The color drained from Sandra's face like water from a broken vessel. She glanced nervously toward the kitchen, then back at me with rapidly calculating eyes. We have absolutely no idea what you're referring to, Harold. We've been driving back and forth on that highway for hours, searching every possible location. I removed my smartphone and located the recording from July 5th. Daniel's voice filled the living room with crystalline clarity. This unemployment situation is actually perfect timing. We can finally address the situation permanently. Then Sandra's cold calculation. And if something unfortunate happens to him during this vulnerable period, well, elderly people become confused and disoriented when they're under stress. Emma stepped back from me, confusion replacing joy in her young face. Michael looked between his parents and me, sensing tension and conflict he couldn't understand or process. I have complete recordings, Daniel, I said, stopping the playback and looking directly into my son's eyes. Your voices, your detailed plan, your financial motivations. Every word about eliminating the Harold problem and inheriting this house. Daniel made one final, desperate attempt at manipulation and damage control. Dad, families forgive each other. We can work through this misunderstanding together. Think about Emma and Michael. They need their grandfather in their lives. You stopped being my son the moment you planned to murder me for money. I replied quietly but firmly. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your belongings and leave this house forever. Sandra's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the calculating person beneath. You cannot simply throw us out like unwanted guests. We have established legal residency rights. We've lived here for 4 years as legitimate tenants. As my invited guests, I corrected, holding up my smartphone again. Guests who conspired to kill their host. My attorney receives copies of everything if I fail to check in daily. Attempt to harass or threaten me, and you'll discover exactly how seriously law enforcement takes elder abuse and attempted murder. The following hour passed in frantic packing, accompanied by muffled arguments and bitter recriminations. Emma cried softly while gathering her belongings, and my heart broke for the innocent children caught in their parents' moral failure. I knelt beside Emma and Michael during a quiet moment. You can visit me when you're older and able to make your own decisions, I told them gently. This situation is about choices your parents made, not about you or your relationship with me. Car doors slammed with finality. Engine started. Tail lights disappeared into Springfield twilight like bad memories fading. I stood alone in my kitchen, looking at the empty space on the refrigerator where my warning note had hung like a sword over their heads. Margaret's favorite mug sat on the counter, waiting patiently for evening tea. I filled it with hot water and sat at our table, now properly set for one person instead of a family that had never truly existed. Tomorrow, I would call my attorney anyway, ensuring that some lessons stick permanently and that justice extends beyond mere immediate consequences. Thank you for joining me in this story of courage, dignity, and the fundamental importance of self-respect in family relationships. If this narrative resonated with your own life experiences or reminded you of challenges you've faced, I invite you to subscribe for more thoughtful stories that explore the complexity of family dynamics, loyalty, and the courage required to stand up for what's right. Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I read every response and truly value the wisdom our community brings to these important conversations. Your stories and insights help others who may be facing similar challenges with family members who have lost their way. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is establish firm boundaries and demand the respect we've earned through decades of sacrifice and generosity.